thought I had found the kind of love people write songs about, the kind that feels too good to be true. And as it turns out, it was. My name is Clara, and for 3 years, I was married to a man named Daniel. He was an architect, a man who built beautiful, stable structures for a living. I thought he had built our life together with the same precision and care. I was so wrong. It all started to unravel on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. But let me go back to the beginning, to how we met. It was at a friend's wedding, one of those sunny, late afternoon ceremonies where everything seems dipped in gold. I was a bridesmaid, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the crowd. He was a guest, a colleague of the groom. I noticed him across the lawn, not because he was aggressively handsome, but because he looked so calm. While everyone else was laughing loudly, he had a quiet smile, observing everything. Our eyes met during the toast, and he didn't look away. He just held my gaze and gave a small, almost shy nod. Later, he found me near the dessert table. He didn't use a cheesy line. He just pointed to the miniature lemon tarts and said, "I've been standing here for 5 minutes trying to decide. Are they as good as they look?" His voice was warm, like honeyed tea. I told him they were better. We spent the rest of the evening talking, and it was the easiest conversation of my life. He was thoughtful, asking questions and actually listening to the answers. He told me about his passion for restoring old buildings, about how he loved finding the soul hidden beneath layers of paint and neglect. I told him I was a book editor, that I loved getting lost in other people's stories. He said that sounded like the perfect job for someone with eyes that noticed everything. I should have wondered what he meant by that. In the weeks that followed, Daniel was impeccable. He was consistently, reliably wonderful. He remembered my favorite flower, peonies, and they would show up at my office for no reason. He knew I hated talking on the phone first thing in the morning, so he'd just send a simple text. "Hope you have a good day, Clara." He was never late, never flaky, never forgot a promise. He planned dates with the same attention to detail he gave his blueprints. A picnic in the park, complete with a vintage blanket and a playlist of songs from the 70s, because I'd mentioned I loved that era. A surprise trip to a dusty old bookstore in a town an hour away because he'd read about their collection of first editions. He made me feel seen, understood, and cherished in a way I never had before. My friends adored him. My family thought he was a rock. My father, a man not easily impressed, pulled me aside one day and said, "Clara, that one, he's a keeper. He's solid." And he was. He was so solid. When he proposed, it was after a year together, on a weekend getaway to a coastal inn. It wasn't a grand public spectacle. He woke me up at 5 a.m. and led me, sleepy and confused, down to the empty beach. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in streaks of pink and orange. He got down on one knee in the sand, holding out a simple, elegant ring. "Clara," he said, his voice steady but his eyes shining, "you are the most beautiful story I've ever read, and I never want to reach the last page. Will you let me build a life with you?" I cried. Of course I did, and said yes 1,000 times. Our wedding was small and perfect. He wrote his own vows. He promised to always be my sanctuary, my safe harbor in any storm. I believed him with my entire soul. The first year of marriage was a dream. We bought a little house with a big backyard, one he said had good bones. He'd spend weekends happily working on it, fixing a leaky faucet, repainting the bedroom. I'd bring him coffee and watch him work, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was so capable, so present. I felt so lucky. But then, almost imperceptibly at first, the seasons began to change, and so did he. It started with the phone. He never, ever let it out of his sight. He took it into the bathroom with him. He slept with it under his pillow. I teased him about it once, calling it his third hand. He laughed it off, a little too quickly, and said, "You know how work is, Clara." A client could have an emergency at any time. He was a dedicated professional, so I accepted it. Then there were the business trips. They were always last minute, always urgent. A historic building in a town 3 hours away was suddenly facing unexpected structural issues and needed his immediate assessment. He'd pack a bag, kiss me goodbye, and tell me he'd be back in a day or two. He always called when he said he would. At exactly 8 p.m. and 2 minutes, his voice warm and familiar down the line. He'd tell me about the boring meetings, the problematic load-bearing walls, the dinner he had alone at a hotel restaurant. I never had a reason to doubt him. Not then. The first real crack appeared one Sunday afternoon. We were lazing on the couch, a documentary playing in the background. His phone, which was usually glued to his hip, was charging on the kitchen counter. It buzzed, not once, but 3 times in quick succession. A text message, then another, then a third. He was in the middle of telling a story about his project manager, and he didn't flinch. He didn't even seem to hear it. I said, "Dan, your phone is going off." He waved a hand. "It can wait. Probably just spam." But the buzzing had a certain urgency to it, a pattern that felt personal, not robotic. A cold, tiny knot formed in my stomach. I pushed it down. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure. This was Daniel, my Daniel, the man who brought me peonies and remembered my mother's birthday, the man who built me bookshelves with his own 2 hands. But the seed of doubt had been planted. A few weeks later, I was looking for a receipt for our tax returns. He handled all our finances, another thing I was grateful for. He was so organized, he kept all his important papers in a locked filing cabinet in his home office. He'd given me the key a year ago, telling me, "Just in case you ever need anything, it's in the top drawer." I had never used it until that day. I found the receipt easily. But as I was closing the drawer, a small, glossy corner of a photo, tucked behind a hanging folder, caught my eye. My heart did a little stutter. I pulled it out. It was a picture of Daniel, looking a few years younger, his hair a little shorter. He was smiling that same warm smile, but he wasn't alone. He had his arm around a woman with light brown hair, and standing in front of them was a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, beaming up at him with a gap-toothed grin. She was holding his hand. The caption, written in neat handwriting on the white border, read, "Lake Trip 2018. My blood ran cold. 2018. That was the year before I met him. I stared at the photo, my mind racing, trying to find a logical explanation. A cousin, a niece, a friend's family. But the way the little girl was holding his hand, the possessive way the woman leaned into him, it felt familial. It felt like a family. I heard his key in the front door. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, his voice echoing through the house. I froze, the photo feeling like a burning coal in my hand. I quickly shoved it back into its hiding place, slammed the drawer shut, and turned the key just as he walked into the office. "What are you up in here?" he asked, smiling, dropping a kiss on my head. I forced a smile onto my face, hoping my eyes weren't screaming with panic. "Just found that receipt," I said, my voice sounding strangely high-pitched to my own ears. "The one for the new water heater." He nodded, completely unsuspecting. "Great. Hey, I'm starving. What do you say we order some Thai food?" He was so normal, so perfectly, terrifyingly normal. And in that moment, looking at his familiar, trusting face, I knew. The perfect man I had married was a perfect lie, and I was now living inside of it. The world after finding that photo was the same world, but everything in it had shifted a few degrees off its axis. Colors seemed less bright, sounds felt muffled. I moved through my days like an actor playing the part of Clara, the happy wife. I smiled at Daniel, I cooked our meals, I asked about his day, all while a silent, screaming movie of that photograph played on a loop behind my eyes. The woman's light brown hair, the little girl's gap-toothed grin, his relaxed, happy posture. Lake Trip 2018. I became a detective in my own life, a spy in my own home, my heart a constant, frantic drum against my ribs. The first thing I did was search for more photos. While Daniel was in the shower, the water pounding a steady rhythm, I would slip into his office and carefully open the filing cabinet. My hands trembled so violently the first time that I dropped the key. I searched every folder, every sleeve, but found nothing else. He had been careless with that one single picture, and that carelessness felt like a taunt. I started noting the times of his phone calls. The 8 p.m. and 2 minutes call was a ritual, never missed. But sometimes his phone would vibrate with a specific, soft, double buzz around 9003 in the morning, always on a Wednesday. He would glance at it, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips, and then silence it. He never took those calls. He would just type a quick message and put the phone away. I began to hate Wednesdays. I started checking our phone records online, a privilege he had given me so I could help manage the bills. The number that called at 8 p.m. and 2 minutes during his trips was listed as office landline. But there was another number, one that appeared frequently, listed only as the client. It called every Wednesday morning and sometimes late on Sunday evenings. I wrote the number down on a tiny scrap of paper and hid it in the spine of an old book on my shelf. It felt like holding a live wire. One evening, we were watching a movie, a romantic comedy he'd picked, which was unusual for him. A scene came on where the main character discovers her husband has been leading a double life. I felt my entire body go rigid. I dared a glance at Daniel. He was staring at the screen, his expression unreadable. Then he let out a soft, dismissive snort. "It's so unrealistic," he said, taking a sip of his wine. "How could someone possibly maintain two separate lives like that? The logistics alone would be a nightmare." His voice was so calm, so analytical, as if he were discussing a complex architectural problem. The cold knot in my stomach tightened into a frozen stone. "Yeah," I managed to whisper, my throat dry. "Impossible." I knew then, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was not dealing with a man who had a simple secret. I was dealing with a master planner, a man for whom lies were just another set of blueprints. The confrontation happened accidentally. It was a Saturday, and we were cleaning out the garage to make space for a project car he wanted to restore. It was a normal, domestic task, the kind we used to enjoy together. He was sorting through old boxes of his college things, and I was wiping down shelves. He lifted a heavy cardboard box, and a small, framed photo fell out, landing face up on the concrete floor. The glass didn't break. It was a picture from our wedding day. We were standing at the altar, looking at each other, my face radiant with joy, his filled with what I had always believed was utter devotion. He picked it up, a fond smile on his face. "Look at us," he said softly, handing it to me. "The happiest day of my life." I took the frame, my eyes tracing the familiar image, and that's when I saw it. It was in the background, just a blur of guests, but my eyes, now trained to look for secrets, locked onto it. A woman, sitting a few rows back, partially obscured by my uncle's shoulder. She had light brown hair. It was the same woman from the lake photo. She was at our wedding. She was watching me marry her. What? The father of her child? Her husband? The world swam, the garage walls closing in on me. The happy bubble of our wedding day had been punctured, and this stranger had been there all along, a silent witness to my ignorance. "Clara? Honey, are you okay? You look pale," Daniel said, his voice laced with genuine-sounding concern. He reached for me, but I flinched back, clutching the photo frame so hard the wood dug into my palm. "Who is she?" The words were out before I could stop them, quiet and brittle. His smile didn't falter, but it became fixed like a mask. "Who is who, sweetheart?" He was so calm. It was inhuman. I pointed a trembling finger at the woman in the background of our wedding photo. "Her." The woman with the light brown hair. "Who is she?" He took the frame from my hands, his expression one of mild curiosity. He studied the photo for a moment, then chuckled. It was a light, easy sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, her? That's Sarah. She was a junior architect at the firm back then. James must have invited her. I barely knew her. She left the company not long after that." "Why?" He looked me directly in the eyes, his gaze steady and clear. He was so good at this. The lie was seamless, effortless. He had a name ready, a reason for her being there, a plausible explanation for her disappearance from his life. The perfect lie, built to withstand a casual inquiry. But it wasn't casual. I had seen the lake photo. I knew the intimacy in that captured moment. The lie he just told me was more of a betrayal than the secret itself. It was the gaslighting that followed the discovery. It was him looking at me, the woman he vowed to love, and deliberately, calmly, dismantling my reality. "You barely knew her?" I repeated, my voice a hollow echo. "Yeah," he said, shrugging and placing the photo back in the box. He turned back to the shelves, effectively ending the conversation. It was a big office. Lots of people came and went. I stood there in the middle of the garage, surrounded by the dusty relics of our life together, and I felt something inside me break open. The trust, the foundation of our entire marriage, crumbled into dust. I knew he was lying, and he knew that I knew. The game had changed. The following week was a cold war fought in silence behind a facade of normalcy. I stopped asking questions. I stopped trying to catch him in a lie. I became quiet, withdrawn, observing him like a scientist would a dangerous, unpredictable animal. He seemed to relax, believing his explanation had worked, that I had accepted his reality. That was his mistake. He underestimated the quiet rage of a woman who has been made a fool. My breakthrough came from the most mundane of places, a forgotten jacket. The weather had turned chilly, and Daniel asked me to grab his old winter coat from the attic. I hadn't been up there in months. It was a dark, dusty space filled with Christmas decorations and boxes of memories we never looked at. I found his coat hanging on a rafter. As I pulled it down, a small, crumpled piece of paper fluttered out of the pocket and landed on the floor. It was a receipt from a gas station. The date on it was from 3 months ago, from one of his business trips. The location was a town called Oak Creek, 2 hours north of here, but that wasn't the part that made my breath stop. The part that froze me in place, there in the dusty attic light, was the timestamp. The purchase was made at 11:14 a.m. on a Wednesday. The same day he was supposedly in a meeting 3 hours in the opposite direction. The same day he always got those silent morning texts. And scribbled in the corner of the receipt, in Daniel's distinct architectural handwriting, was an address, 1427 Maple Lane. It wasn't enough. A gas station receipt and an address proved nothing. He could have taken a detour. It could have been a client's address. But coupled with the photo, with the woman at our wedding, with the lies, it was a roadmap. I knew with every fiber of my being that 1427 Maple Lane in Oak Creek was where I would find the truth. I had to see it for myself. I had to look through the window and see the other life he had built. The planning felt like an out-of-body experience. I told him I was visiting my sister for the weekend, a 2-day trip to help her with her kids. He seemed relieved, even happy for me to have a break. He didn't offer to drive me. He didn't ask many questions. On Saturday morning, I packed a bag, kissed him goodbye, and got in my car. I drove in the opposite direction of my sister's house. I pointed my car north, towards Oak Creek, towards 1427 Maple Lane. The 2-hour drive felt both endless and impossibly short. My hands were clenched on the steering wheel the entire time. I didn't play any music. I just listened to the sound of the tires on the pavement and the frantic beating of my own heart. I was about to unmask my own life, and I was terrified of what I would find. The drive to Oak Creek was a blur of gray highway and my own chaotic thoughts. I had memorized the address, 1427 Maple Lane, until it was a mantra chanting itself in time with the windshield wipers. A light, cold rain had begun to fall, making the world outside look smeared and unreal, which felt appropriate. I didn't have a plan. What was the plan? Ring the doorbell and ask if Daniel was home? I was operating on pure, desperate instinct, a need to see the truth with my own eyes, to replace the haunting images in my mind with something solid, even if that something solid would destroy me. I took the exit for Oak Creek, my GPS chirping a calm, automated direction that felt obscenely normal. The town was picturesque, the kind of place you see on a postcard, with a quaint main street and old trees lining the sidewalks. Maple Lane was a residential street just on the outskirts of town, a row of well-kept family homes with tidy lawns and swing sets. It was the picture of suburban tranquility, a world away from our more modern neighborhood. I slowed the car to a crawl, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I felt dizzy. 1421, 1423, 1425, there it was. 1425, there it was. 1427 Maple Lane. It was a charming 2-story colonial house painted a soft, pale blue with white trim. A neatly trimmed hedge lined the walkway. A plastic pink bicycle with training wheels lay on its side on the front lawn, and parked in the driveway was a car. A dark gray sedan, the same make, model, and color as the one Daniel drove. My breath hitched. It couldn't be a coincidence. He could have a client here. He could have. My frantic internal justification machine sputtered and died, because then the front door of the pale blue house opened, and he walked out. Daniel! My husband! He was wearing jeans and a casual sweatshirt I'd never seen before. He was laughing, looking back over his shoulder at someone still inside. He looked relaxed, utterly at home. In his hand was a small green watering can. He walked over to a flower bed near the porch and began tending to a cluster of purple flowers. He was watering the plants, a mundane domestic task, in a yard with a child's bicycle, at a house 2 hours from our home. The world narrowed to this single devastating frame. I had pulled over a few houses down, partially hidden by a large van. I slid down in my seat, my hands trembling so violently I had to grip the steering wheel to steady them. I watched, paralyzed, as a scene from my darkest imagination played out in perfect, high-definition reality. The woman from the photograph, Sarah, stepped out onto the porch. She had a cup of coffee in her hand. She was wearing comfortable-looking loungewear, her light brown hair pulled up in a messy bun. She smiled at Daniel, a soft, familiar smile that spoke of years of shared mornings. Then, the little girl from the photo skipped out the door, her blonde pigtails bouncing. She ran straight to Daniel, wrapping her arms around his legs. He put down the watering can, scooped her up with one effortless motion, and settled her on his hip. She giggled, pointing at something in the garden. He said something to her, and her laughter echoed down the quiet street. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated joy. I was witnessing a perfect Saturday morning, a perfect family moment. The only problem was, it was my husband, and it wasn't my family. I felt a physical pain, a sharp, stabbing sensation in my chest, as if my heart were actually breaking. The air left my lungs and didn't seem to want to come back. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't a fling. This was a life. A whole, complete, parallel life. He had a home. He had a routine. He had a daughter. The little girl, who looked to be about 6 years old now, was his. The math was undeniable. 2018. She was born before he ever met me. He had been a father all this time. All the lies rearranged themselves in my head, clicking into a new, horrifying configuration. The business trips, the phone calls at 8 p.m. in 2 minutes. He wasn't in a hotel room alone. He was here, in this pale blue house, reading bedtime stories to his daughter. The Wednesday morning texts. That was probably Sarah, checking in, coordinating their shared life. The locked phone, the evasiveness. It all made a terrible, perfect sense. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was living a second, full-time life, and I was the other woman in my own marriage. I was the secret. The thought was so degrading, so utterly humiliating. It brought hot, sharp tears to my eyes. I cried silently, the tears streaming down my face as I watched the man I loved play with a child I never knew existed. I watched him lean in and kiss Sarah on the cheek. I watched him put the little girl down, and she ran back inside. He stood there for a moment, his hands on his hips, surveying his domain, his other domain, with a look of satisfaction. He looked happy, truly, peacefully happy. And in that moment, I hated him with a ferocity that scared me. It was a clean, cold, sharp hatred. Every sweet memory, every tender moment, every "I love you" was now poisoned, revealed as a calculated part of this elaborate deception. The picnics, the wedding vows, the peonies. It was all just set dressing for the main performance, which was here on Maple Lane. How long did I sit there? I don't know. It could have been 5 minutes or an hour. Time had lost all meaning. Eventually, Daniel went back inside, closing the pale blue door behind him, shutting me out of a world I was never meant to see. The street was quiet again. The perfect scene was over. The show was done for now. I started the car, my movements robotic. I pulled away from the curb, driving slowly at first, then faster and faster, as if I could outrun the images burned into my retina. I drove until I found a deserted parking lot behind a closed-down grocery store. I turned off the engine, and the silence was deafening. The full weight of what I had seen came crashing down on me. I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt erased. For 3 years, I had built a life on a foundation of quicksand. My marriage was a legal document, a shared mortgage, a pile of photos, but it had no substance. The real heart of his life, his true identity as a father and a partner, was here. I was the side project, the renovation he worked on when he was in town. The sobs came then, great, heaving waves of them that racked my entire body. I cried for the loss of my husband, for the death of the man I thought he was. I cried for the woman in the blue house, who was also living a lie, married to a man who had another wife. Did she know? The question hit me like a bolt of lightning. Did Sarah know about me? Was she another victim in this? Or was she a willing participant? The way she looked at him, it seemed so genuine. But then, so had his looks at me. He was a master of his craft. I thought of the little girl, her innocent laughter. She had a father who loved her, that much was clear from the scene I witnessed. But she also had a father who was a ghost in another home, a man who disappeared for days at a time. What lies did he tell her? What stories did he weave to explain his absences? The moral complexity of it was staggering. My rage towards Daniel was absolute, but the situation he had created was a web of collateral damage that now included a child. I couldn't just explode into his life and demand answers. Not yet. Not without understanding the full scope of the devastation. I had the truth, but the truth I was discovering was not a simple thing. It was a bomb, and I was holding the detonator. I had to decide if, when, and how to press the button. I drove back to my empty hotel room near my sister's town, the 2-hour return journey, a numb, silent haze. I didn't go to my sister's. I couldn't face her. I couldn't pretend. I lay on the stiff hotel bed, staring at the textured ceiling, the image of the pale blue house, the pink bicycle, and the little girl's laughing face seared into my mind. I had gone to Oak Creek to find a secret, and I had found a whole other world, and I was now a stranger in both of mine. The confrontation was inevitable, but first, I had to figure out how to survive the fallout. The drive home from that hotel was the longest of my life. The 2 hours felt like a journey between two different universes. In one universe, I was Clara, the betrayed wife, my heart shredded and my reality in ashes. In the other, I was still Clara the wife, soon to be confronted with the man who had done this, and I had to decide which version of me would walk through our front door. The raw, screaming victim wanted to throw the evidence in his face, to shatter his world as he had shattered mine. But the quiet, calculating survivor who had emerged in that Oak Creek parking lot knew that would be a mistake. He was a master of lies. He would have a story, an excuse, a way to twist it all around. I couldn't give him the chance. I had to be a wall. I had to be the unshakable truth he couldn't manipulate. I parked my car down the street from our house, watching the windows for a while. The lights were on. He was home, our home. The word felt like a joke now. I took a deep, shuddering breath, wiped the last of the tears from my face, and walked to the door. My key felt foreign in the lock. He was in the living room, stretched out on the sofa, watching a basketball game. He looked up, his face breaking into that easy, familiar smile. "Hey, you!" "I missed you. How was your sister's?" The normalcy of it was a special kind of violence. I didn't smile back. I didn't take off my coat. I just stood there, in the middle of the room, my purse still hanging from my shoulder. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat, devoid of all the emotion that was churning inside me. His smile faded, replaced by a look of concerned confusion. "Okay? What's wrong, Clara? You look upset. Did something happen with your sister?" He moved to get up, to come to me, to offer comfort. I took a step back. "Don't," I said, the words sharp and final. He stopped, his confusion now tinged with wariness. "Okay, just tell me what's going on." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now, cold and steady. I opened the photos I had taken, the ones of the pale blue house, the pink bicycle, the car in the driveway. I turned the screen towards him. I didn't say a word. I just watched his face. I saw the exact moment his brain processed what he was seeing. The color drained from his face. His jaw went slack. The carefully constructed mask of the concerned husband crumbled, revealing the terrified man beneath. It was the most authentic expression I had seen on his face in years. "Clara," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "I can explain." "No," I said, my voice still eerily calm. "You can't, but you can listen. Her name is Sarah. The little girl's name is Lily. You live at 1427 Maple Lane in Oak Creek. You water the flowers on Saturday mornings. You've been a father for 6 years. You were a father when you met me. You were a father when you proposed to me. You were a father when you stood at that altar and promised me forever." Each sentence was a hammer blow. He flinched with everyone. "It's not what you think," he stammered, running a hand through his hair, his eyes wild. It's complicated." "Complicated?" A bitter, broken laugh escaped my lips. "Daniel, you have a whole other family. What is complicated about that? Is there a third one? A fourth? How many lives are you juggling?" "It's not like that," he insisted, his voice rising. "Sarah and I, we were young. It was a mistake. We weren't happy. But then she got pregnant. I had to be there for Lily. I had to. But I didn't love her. I love you. You are my wife. This, here, is my real life." He was still lying. He was still trying to manage the narrative, to paint himself as the noble, trapped father, and me as the true love. I thought of the way he looked at Sarah on that porch, the comfortable intimacy between them. It wasn't the look of a man trapped in a mistake. It was the look of a man at home. "You were at our wedding," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "She was there. You invited your other family to our wedding." That finally broke him. The last of his defenses collapsed. He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. "She insisted," he mumbled into his palms. "She said she needed to see it. To see you. To understand." The monstrousness of it took my breath away. This woman, This other victim of his had been forced to sit and watch the man she loved marry someone else, and I had been the oblivious star of the show. I felt a sudden, shocking wave of pity for her. We were both prisoners in his labyrinth. "You are a monster," I said, the words not angry but filled with a weary, final horror. "You have been slowly, carefully destroying 2 women for years. You have built a life for your daughter on a foundation of lies. Do you have any idea what you've done?" He looked up, his eyes pleading. "Clara, please, we can fix this. I will end it with her. I will move them away. We can go to therapy. We can start over." He truly believed it was possible. He believed he could just dismantle one life and keep the other, like revising a flawed blueprint. He didn't understand that the foundation was gone. There was nothing left to build on. "No," I said, with a finality that echoed through the room. "There is no we. There is no fixing this. You don't get to choose which life to keep. That choice is mine now, and I choose to walk away from the lie." I turned and walked towards our bedroom. He followed me, his voice desperate now. "Clara, wait. Think about this. What about our house, our life? I love you." I stopped in the doorway and looked back at him, at the stranger I had shared a bed with for 3 years. "You don't love me," I said. "You don't even know what love is. Love is truth. Love is safety. You offered me a beautiful prison. The only thing I want from you now is my freedom." I packed a bag that night. I took only what was mine from before him and the essentials. He watched me from the doorway, silent and broken, but I felt no satisfaction. There was only a vast, hollow emptiness. I didn't go to my sister's. I rented a small, furnished apartment on the other side of the city. The silence there was my own. It was heavy and sad, but it was honest. The divorce proceedings were ugly, as they always are when a house of cards collapses. He fought at first, then he acquiesced. I learned through my lawyer that he had, in fact, legally married Sarah years before he met me. Our marriage was never valid. I was never actually his wife. The final unmasking was the most profound of all. I had not just been betrayed. I had been living a legal fiction. I spent months in therapy, untangling the knots of grief, rage, and humiliation. The hardest part was forgiving myself for not seeing it, for believing in the perfect fairy tale he sold me. I had to learn to trust my own instincts again, to understand that the tiny voice of doubt I had pushed down for so long was the voice of my own intelligence, trying to save me. I never spoke to Daniel again. I heard through the grapevine that he and Sarah tried to make it work, now that the secret was out. I don't know if they succeeded. I don't care. My healing was not about his punishment. It was about my own reconstruction. I had to build a new life, from the ground up, on a foundation of brutal, unshakable truth. The moral of the story, the one powerful truth I learned from love's darkest corner, is this: love should feel like a sanctuary, not a maze. If you find yourself constantly looking for the exit, for the hidden doors and the false walls, it's not love you're in, it's a trap. The most important trust is not the trust you place in another person, it's the trust you place in yourself. Listen to the whispers, believe what you see, and have the courage to walk away from the most beautiful lie, because only then can you find an honest life.